Good morning, students. Welcome back to online sessions. This is our seventh session, I guess. So, in our previous session, we discussed about computing environments. So, based on how the user will interact with the computer, we have categorized these computing environments into four, isn't it? The first type of computing environment is personal computing environment, then time sharing computing environment, client server computing environment, and finally the distributed computing environment. Okay, so in the early days of computers, as the computer size was very big and there is no interconnectivity between the computers, so there was no sharing of resources between the computers is possible, so we said there was only one possible type of computing environment, that is mainframe computing environment. So we call that computer, whatever big room size computer we were having, we called that computer as mainframe computer, and we call that computing environment as mainframe computing environment. So whatever the task, whatever the job the user wants to accomplish by that computer, he has to give that job to that computer only, and that computer solely responsible for accomplishing the user's job, isn't it? There is no sharing of job, no sharing of resources, nothing. Only we are going to have only one computer, and whatever computing resources of that much big size we were having, we have to utilize those resources only. Okay, that is the problem of mainframe computing environment. So later, the researchers, the scientists, they thought that whatever scope, the limited scope they were having, which is not sufficient, which was not sufficient. So immediately what they have done, they have gone for some advancements or some what we call research kind of thing in the computing environment. So uh, to their good, or to their benefit, we said in the year 1971, Marcian E. Hoff, working for Intel organization, what he has done, he embedded all the required components of a computer onto a single chip, isn't it? He integrated all the required components of a computer on a single chip, and he called it as a microprocessor chip. Okay, and they named it as Intel 404, the first microprocessor onto a single chip. Now, the big size computer we got in our hand, we mean to say on a single chip, isn't it? So, with this advancement, we got now, as the computer size got decreased, okay, from the room size to a table size, so we got many different computing environments. Okay, the first one is the personal computing environment, where we are going to have all of our resources connected to that single microprocessor chip, isn't it? Whatever input devices, whatever output devices, whatever processing units we were having, we have connected all those devices to that single microprocessor chip. And we are calling such a computing environment as a personal computing environment. Still, here also, the sharing of resources is not possible, we said. So then we have time sharing environment, where multiple terminals, multiple dumb devices, we are connecting to a central powerful computer, and here in this case only the central powerful computer is responsible for satisfying all the required needs of all the connected terminals. Okay, so here the response time will be more, because after satisfying every terminal needs, the central computer will shift to the second terminal, third terminal, likewise. So we discussed all these things in detail in our last class, so again I'm not repeating that one. So simply we said the response time will be more in time sharing environment. That is the reason why we are going for client server environment, where the work will be distributed, where the work will be shared between client as well as the servers, isn't it? So the response time, to some extent, it is decreased. Okay, then we have the distributed computing environment, where the work will be distributed between multiple servers as well as multiple clients. So here also the response time will be less, as you have more number of computational devices involving in order to satisfy your job. Hopefully you understood all these concepts, and many of you are asking that they have some sort of doubts in what we discussed, the creating and running programs. See, I suggest you to just wait for the practical stuff. When we start the stuff practically, at that point you will get these concepts thoroughly. Or else we have the doubt session on Wednesday, so you can wait for that doubt session as well. You can clarify your doubts in that doubt sessions as well. Okay, first you follow my video, then open the notes which I have provided and read it once. Still you have the doubt, then post me on the WhatsApp, on my personal WhatsApp. If I get free time, or if the doubt is a small one, then I will clarify the doubt over the texts. If the doubt which you asked, if it is not able to, I'm unable to satisfy that over the text, then you have to wait for the doubt session. Okay, many of you are asking, sir, what is the use of linker when we are doing this creating and running programs? So I told you that this linker will link the library modules with your current source code or current program. So linking the library modules here, in the sense, it will simply replaces the user defined as well as predefined functions with their actual body, with their actual code. Now, in order to understand this statement, this particular statement, you have to wait for some time until and unless we start the practical stuff. Because what are user defined functions, you don't know. What are predefined functions, you don't know. And what are library files, you don't know. So in order to understand all these things, you have to see the stuff working. You have to see the programs working. Then only you will understand. Okay, hopefully you will have some sort of patience before getting the clarity. Okay, so with this, we have to enter into the second part of your first unit. That is nothing but second chapter of your first unit, that is algorithms, flowcharts, okay, pseudocodes, structure charts, many different things we are going to discuss in this second part of your first unit, that is second chapter of your first unit. Okay, so I promised that we are going to conclude the first chapter in 4 sessions, but I took 2 extra sessions, isn't it? We have concluded the first chapter in 6 sessions. I hope the second chapter will complete on track and will move forward. Okay, we'll move forward. So quickly we'll start today's session. That is the second part of your first unit, that is program development. Okay, program development, or creating algorithms, creating pseudocodes, creating flowcharts, and writing programs. All these things we'll discuss over here. The second part of your first unit, second chapter of your first unit. So quickly, all these things we discussed in my previous session. Quickly we have to see what are program development steps. So why we have to follow a particular procedure whenever we are doing the development of a program? Can't we write the program directly? Isn't it? Can't we write the program directly? And what is the need to follow these development procedure or these development steps? To understand this, I will give you a simple example of a, let us assume construction of a building. Construction of a building. So a person X, we are considering a person X, is having some land, and he wants to construct a building on that land. So can he do it by himself? No, it is not possible. So definitely he has to go for an engineer, and he has to get the plan, and he make that plan working in order to get that finalized building, isn't it? So how the procedure will go, we'll discuss step by step, and we relate this concept, this real-time concept, with our program development stuff, program development thing. Hopefully you understood. So a person X is having some land, and he wants to construct a building on that land. So what he will do? He approaches a civil engineer, isn't it? He approaches the civil engineer and he tells the civil engineer that I have so and so land and I want a building on that land. So then what what this civil engineer will do? After taking this much of requirement, can he start the construction job? No. Isn't it? It is also not possible. Before starting that building, the civil engineer has to take the full requirements from the person X. Now the person X is the customer, isn't it? Because he wants that building, so he is our customer. So now onwards, we call him as customer. So the customer X is approaching the civil engineer for the construction of his building. So what the civil engineer will do, he will ask the full-fledged requirements from the customer. So at that stage, the customer's job is to give the full-fledged requirements to the civil engineer. So what he will do, how he want that building to be, where he want the main entrance, okay, how many doors he wants, how many windows he wants, how many floors he wants, how many bedrooms, how many halls, dining halls, how many kitchen rooms, okay, how many toilets, okay, where the parking area should be. All these things he will explain to the civil engineer. So what the civil engineer will do, he will note down all those things on a paper, isn't it? All those requirements on a paper. Now, after gathering all the requirements, can he start the construction? No, still he is not ready for the construction. So then what the civil engineer will do after taking the requirements means, he will design a plan according to the customer's requirements. Isn't it? A plan for the building, which is very much required. A plan for the building. So what he will do? He will plan a design. He will plan a map, okay, from the requirements of the customer. So after having the plan, he will get the confirmation from the customer. He will show that plan to the customer and he will get the confirmation. So once the customer gave the clarification, okay, satisfied with the plan, now the civil engineer can start that work, isn't it? So based on that plan only, he has to construct that building because he got the confirmation on the plan, isn't it? So he's showing the hall of so and so dimensions in the plan, but when it comes to real time, if it is a smaller one, is the customer going to accept? No, he's not going to accept. So definitely whatever he is showing onto the plan, the same thing he has to reflect in real time. Isn't it? The same thing he has to reflect in real time. Then only the customer will be satisfied. So here the role of the civil engineer is to satisfy the customer. Okay, by showing the design working, he has to satisfy the customer. So in this way, the construction of a building in real time takes place. Isn't it? In this way, the construction of a building in real time takes place. First, the requirement gathering from the customer, then planning, isn't it? After gathering, he will plan, he will make the plan, the blueprint of that building. So once the plan is ready, again he will get the confirmation on that plan, and once he get the clarity confirmation on the plan, he can start, the civil engineer can start the construction. So when for a real-time plan, real-time thing only, we are doing this much planning. When it comes to programming, it is completely virtual, isn't it? It is completely virtual when it comes to the programming. We don't see what we are writing, what we are going to get after writing the code, we don't see in physical. It is completely virtual. So for a virtual entity to design, or for a virtual entity to develop, definitely there should be a plan. So that plan is having these 4 steps, whatever I have listed over here, to develop a solution. See, in general, for what we develop the software engineering, isn't it? Software products. For what we develop the software products or software applications. In short, softwares. For what we develop the softwares. Okay, we have a lot of real-time problems. We have a lot of real-time problems, and we develop softwares, we develop applications for those real-time problems to solve those real-time problems. The problem can be smaller, medium in size, or a heavy duty, isn't it? Heavy duty in the sense very big. So to solve all these types, all these categories of problems, we are going for the development of a software or development of an application. Simply, a person is giving you two numbers and he wants you to add those two numbers. For that also we can develop an application using C programming. We'll start at that level only. With minute solutions, we start the programming and slowly we'll get into the bigger ones. Okay? So, for a smaller problem, what we said, a minute problem, what we said, adding two numbers. Adding two numbers is the smaller problem. So, in order to add two numbers, so if it is a smaller one, we can do like 2 plus 2, how much? 4 we can do. But if he is giving a big number, then definitely we have to use a calc, and that calc, how it is functioning. Inside that calc, what program they have loaded, that also we have to analyze, that also we have to understand in order to be a programmer. In order to be a programmer. So from that level only we will start. Hopefully you understood. So for what type of problems we are generating the solutions, in the sense with the help of softwares, in the sense for all types of problems, smaller to bigger. For all types of problems we are generating the solutions. You have to remember this one, you have to understand this one. Understanding is very, very important. Okay, so the smaller problem, already I told you, adding two numbers, subtracting two numbers, multiplying two numbers, these are smaller type of problems. Okay, simply to check whether the temperature is above the boiling point, below the boiling point, above the freezing point, below the freezing point. Doing all these things, they are smaller level problems. But when it comes to a hospital management system, take the example of hospital management system. It is a big problem. So inside an hospital, how many people will work? What are their job roles? Okay, and what type of difficulties they are facing, and what type of documentation they are maintaining. All these things we have to take into consideration when we are developing a hospital management system. Hospital management system is nothing but it is an application. It is a software application. It will help the hospital people in order to get the easiness in their day-to-day activities. Okay, ease of work, for their ease of work, we can say. So inside an hospital, many different departments we are going to have, isn't it? We will be having a dispensary inside a hospital. We'll be having an administrative block. We'll be having a outpatient block. We will be having an inpatient block. We'll be having operation theater. Okay, and how many different types of people will get involved inside an hospital? Okay, inside an hospital, we will be having the cleaning staff, the nurses, okay, the supporting staff, then the doctors, surgeons, okay, the patients. All these people will get involved inside an hospital management system. Then how we are going to develop this solution, how we are going to manage all their activities, day-to-day activities inside our application, it is a very big problem. It is a very big problem, isn't it? So we can develop a solution to such a big problem as well. Smaller problems already we discussed. Bigger problem, I have given an example. Same way you can take the library, your college library, isn't it? Your college library, in order to manage, we can develop a library management system also. A library management system. So inside a library, how many different types of people get involved? There will be a librarian, there will be cleaning staff, there will be supporting staff, okay, there will be students, there will be staff, faculty. All these people will get involved inside a library. And also the books, we're also going to have books inside a library, isn't it? So how these people will work inside a library, what the jobs of a librarian, what the job of a supporting staff, what the job of a student, what the job of a faculty. All these things we have to frame inside our library management system. So development, it is a huge job, big job. So likewise, you can have many different real-time problems of very big size. Take the airlines. Okay, at the airport, different airlines people will work. So there also, how many people will get involved into those jobs? You can take the example of that one, railways. We can take the example of railways. Inside a railway ticket reservation counter, how many people will get involved? Okay. Likewise, you can analyze any type of real-time problem and you can develop a solution, or you can give an application for that type of problem. So developing a solution for all these different types of problems, it is a 4-step process over here. So to develop a solution to the given problem, one has to follow the following steps. Okay. So first of all, what is very much required, or what is very much needed is, we have to understand the problem. If we understand the problem, then only we'll be able to develop the solution. The first point, we have to understand the problem. Understanding the problem is very, very important. If you don't understand, yeah, you will not be able to generate the perfect solution for that problem. So understanding the problem is our first step in the development process. So then develop the solution. That is nothing but your plan. Okay, developing the solution is nothing but your plan. See, understanding the problem is nothing but your requirements. So basically what we do over here is, we'll gather the requirements, and from where we gather the requirements, how we gather the requirements, in the sense with interactions. Interaction with whom we are going to interact? With the customers, isn't it? With the customers we are going to interact. In order, with these interactions only we'll get the requirements. And what is the developing solution? In the sense, having a plan. Okay, then coding. Writing the programs are nothing but coding according to the plan, and finally testing is nothing but your testing only. So these 4 steps we have to follow when we are developing an application. After this, once the testing is done, or during, after the deployment also we can do the testing, or before deployment also we can do the testing. Okay, there will be another stage called deployment stage, that we will not discuss over here. We'll be having a dedicated course or dedicated subject where you are going to study all these steps in detail. Okay, a subject called software engineering. We'll be having a subject called software engineering. It will be in your 5th semester, I guess. Inside your 3rd year, 1st semester, we call it as 5th semester. You will study about this software engineering, and there we will see all these steps in detail. Okay, all these steps in detail. So for now, you simply remember, okay, like a rough idea we are giving over here, how the program development is being done, in the sense, the first step will be the understanding the problem, that is nothing but requirements gathering, then developing the solution, that is nothing but the planning the solution, and then writing the programs, that is nothing but coding, and finally testing the program is nothing but your testing. Hopefully you understood these things, and one by one we will discuss over here understanding the problem. The first step is the first step towards solving any problem is understanding. We have to understand, and to solve any problem, first you must understand the problem by reading the requirements. Here you can see that one. So what I said, in order to understand the problem, what things will have the role means the requirements will have the role. Whatever requirements we have gathered from the end user, that is nothing but from the customer. See, whenever I am using this terminology, you have to remember, customer, end user, both are same. Okay, so when you interact with the end user or when you interact with the customer, you will get the requirements. So those requirements are very much helpful in order to understand your problem. Once you understand it, yeah, you have to review those understanding once again, because whatever you understood from the requirements, whether you are on the right track or not, again you have to review these requirements with your customer as well as the system analyst. There will be a special job role in your organization with name system analyst. His job is to make the things very easy for you. He will also analyze the requirements and he will help you in understanding the problem. The job of a system analyst is to help you in understanding the problem. Okay? So, what the what as a programmer we have to do means we have to read out the document requirements document, then we have to analyze those requirements documents, then we have to review those understandings with the customer as well as the system analyst. So this is understanding the problem. Then we have the second stage, that is develop the solution. So developing the solution, yeah, we discussed here itself. I have shown you here itself. We develop the solution by using these different tools. We have different types of tools over here. What are those means? Your structure charts, your algorithm pseudocode, your flow chart. So these two things are different things. Algorithm and pseudocode, these two things are different things, but they are closely related. That's why I kept your algorithm and pseudocode inside a single step. Hope you understood. So the first step is structure chart. Then we have the what we call algorithm or pseudocode. Then finally the flow chart. Okay. After doing this plan, I mean, once you are done with these three, we are ready with the plan. We are ready with the plan. Requirements analysis, that is nothing but understanding the problem, is over, and now we are ready with a plan. So in order to prepare the plan or in order to make the plan ready, we have to follow these tools: your structure charts, your algorithm or pseudocode, your flow chart. Then after, once the plan is ready, we have to go for writing the program, then testing the program. Okay, this we discussed. Developing the solution. Yeah, to develop a solution to a problem, the following tools are needed. The following tools are needed. What are those? Your structure charts. The first one, your structure chart. So what exactly is a structure chart? How it is helpful in the planning stage? So yeah, for your understanding, a structure chart is nothing but it is a hierarchical diagram. It is a hierarchical chart. So what it will do, it will shows the functional flow. Functional flow is nothing but how the data will flow inside your application. How the data will flow inside your application. To show that one, we use these structure charts. Okay, not only this one, to divide, if your problem, I mean, just now we discussed, we will be having the smaller problems as well as the big, huge problems. So if your problem is very much big, very much huge, can we solve that problem as a single entity? Yes, of course we can solve, but it will become very hectic. It will become very difficult. So what we do? So instead of solving the big problem as a single entity, yeah, we follow the British people strategy. That is nothing but divide and rule. Isn't it? Divide and rule. So we follow that same strategy. So here we call it as divide and solve. We logically divide the big problem into smaller scale units, smaller units, and we solve those smaller units separately, and finally we combine the solution to get the final solution. So likewise, these structure charts not only help you in order to show the functional flow of your data through the program, but also if the problem size is very big, we can divide that problem into smaller units with the help of these structure charts. With the help of these structure charts. Okay. So when you're dividing this big problem into smaller units, how these smaller units will have the interaction, that interaction also we can show with the help of these structure charts. So we can call this structure chart as a architect's blueprint. Architect's blueprint. So how the architect will make use of that blueprint in order to do the construction In that same way, these structure charts will help the developers in order to have the clarity on the problem. Okay, so this structure chart is one such tool. See, this is an outdated one. Nowadays, we are not using these structure charts, but it was there. It was used a lot, so we have to know the importance of it and we have to understand it. That's what we are doing over here. For your exam purpose, you have to remember this structure chart, the purpose of structure chart, and an example for this structure chart. Moreover, in your labs, in this semester, whenever we write the programs, we are not going to do this structure chart concept. We'll start from algorithm. We'll start from algorithm. Okay, so you have to remember this. A structure chart is nothing but it is an hierarchical chart. It will show the functional flow. Functional flow, that is nothing but data flow inside your program. Okay, it shows the problem. Yeah, it shows how the big problem is subdivided into smaller units and how those smaller units will interact with each other. And we said it is an architect's, it is something like an architect's blueprint. Okay, it is something like an architect's blueprint. So hopefully you understood. So one simple example we have taken over here. Let us assume a person wants to buy a laptop and he is taking the expert's advice. So he approached one IT technician or IT professional when of his okay, he is of the person's friend. Let us assume the IT professional is the person's friend. So he wants to buy a laptop. So he is taking the advice from the IT professional, his friend. So what is his problem? I mean, what is his task? Okay, buy a computer. Okay, buy a computer. Okay, we'll go in this way. He wants to buy a computer. Then immediately, what things comes in our mind whenever somebody is asking a suggestion to buy a laptop? Then what things come into our mind? So we need to know what the configuration and how much budget they are keeping for that one. So these two things will come into our mind. So yeah, get configuration. Yeah, definitely I will give the, the professional, IT professional will give the configuration, complete configuration. And once he's giving the configuration accordingly, based on the selection of the person, okay, based on the selection, maybe he will select 2 GB, 4 GB, 8 GB of RAM, different variants we can put in front of him. But what variant he will select, it is completely independent to him only, isn't it? If he selects 4 GB, then the calculation will differ. If he selects 8 GB, again the calculation will differ. If he selects only 2 GB, again the calculation will differ. So based on the configuration selection, he will do the calculation. So during the calculation, he also has to know whether he is buying a desktop and or he is buying a laptop. He has to know this thing as well. So if he is buying a laptop, then the estimation will be less, and if he is buying a desktop, the estimation will be less, and if he is buying a laptop, the estimation will be more. So likewise, if he is okay, let us assume the person has selected the laptop. Then if he is purchasing of Dell brand or of HP brand, again here also the calculations will differ. So after selection of all his configuration, the person's configuration, immediately what the IT professional will do, he will calculate the final estimation cost and he will print that report, isn't it? He will print that report. So this entire task, how it has been subdivided, and what type of interactions it is having, all those things we have shown with the help of this structure chart. Similarly, whatever real-time issue, whatever real-time problem you are going to have, for which you want to develop a program, for which you want to develop an application, you can have a structure chart. Hopefully you understood this one. And as I said, this structure chart concept we will do only for your external exams, and nowhere we are going to follow these structure charts in our program development, as it is an outdated stuff. So after this structure chart, we have the algorithms and pseudocode. So this algorithm we have to stress more, and basically throughout your program development, these algorithms we follow. Okay, that's why pay more attention towards this concept and try to get the concept whenever it is possible. Okay, so what is an algorithm? First of all, we have to define this algorithm and then we have to go accordingly. Yes, what exactly is an algorithm? See, yeah, as we discussed, the civil engineer and that customer, the person X issue over there, whatever requirements the customer is giving, when the civil engineer is developing the plan, he has to do in a step by step procedure, isn't it? He can't do all the stuff randomly. He has to do step by step. And when he is doing step by step, he has to understand the complete system, whether he is getting any issues or not, or what. So let us say the customer X wants a 3-floor building. Okay, a 3-floor building. So first what he has to design, okay, being a civil engineer, he has to do the groundwork first, isn't it? Ground floor work first. Okay, where he is giving the parking and how he wants his dining hall, how he wants his living room, how he wants his kitchen, bedroom, toilets, all those things he has to design. First he has to design the ground floor, isn't it? Then only he can go for the first floor and second floor. Likewise. So can he go directly to the 3rd floor and design? No, it is not possible. The positioning of the toilet, the positioning of the dining room, the living room, definitely it has to come from the ground floor. Isn't it? It has to come from the basic architecture plan. It has to come from the ground floor. How the ground floor is designed, based on that only we can do some sort of estimation for the 1st floor as well as for the 2nd floor. Okay, the lift arrangement, all these things. Definitely we have to do the ground floor plan first. So he has to go in a step-by-step way. Directly he can't go to the 3rd floor and start doing the work for 3rd floor. Isn't it? So in that way, the planning, it has to be done in a step-by-step way. So for a computational problem also, if you have a computational problem like adding 2 numbers or developing an hospital management system, for that also we have to do the stuff in a step-by-step manner. We can't do randomly, or we can't start all the things simultaneously and at some point get a lot of confusion. Isn't it? At some point, what will happen? If you do like that, at some point, what will happen? A lot of confusion will arise into your system. Everybody will get confused what they are doing. So to avoid such type of confusion, we have to plan everything in a step-by-step way. That step-by-step plan, that step-by-step process is nothing but your algorithm. So if you read this definition over here, the first statement, an algorithm is a step-by-step process to solve any given computational problem. So here why I am saying computational means because many things we do in computer terminology only, and whatever solutions we are developing, we are not doing any physical work over there. We are not giving a plan to a building, or we are not designing a automobile kind of thing. Isn't it? We are not doing all those things. Whatever we are doing, basically we do the computational work only, some sort of calculations only in a computer. So an algorithm is a step-by-step process to solve any given computational problem. In accordance to our curriculum, we are discussing this definition. So once again, an algorithm is a step-by-step process to solve any given computational problem. Okay, so hope you got the understanding on this definition, and what is the importance of an algorithm. Hope you got. So then, yeah, a more specific definition we can say, or a more technical definition we can say, the second definition, because the first definition, it is very easy to understand and very easy to remember, but the second definition, when it comes, it is an ordered sequence. It is an ordered sequence of unambiguous and well-defined instructions that performs some tasks and halts in finite time. And halts in finite time. See, it is a very wonderful definition we can say, and it is more specific than the previous one. The previous definition you can apply to our computational world, but not to the specific level, because a lot of things we have to keep in mind when we are narrating, when we are writing the algorithm, and what things we have to keep in mind, all those things we are discussing in this second definition. That is, it is a ordered sequence of unambiguous and well-defined instructions. Ordered sequence means all the steps must come in an orderly manner. So which step you are performing first, that you have to put on top, and which step you are performing last, that step you have to put in the last. So they have to come in an order. They have to come in an order. So ordered sequence of unambiguous. Unambiguous means there should not be any ambiguity. When you are understanding an instruction, when you are reading an instruction, it should give the full clarity. So then only we call that statement, then only we call that instruction as an unambiguous instruction. It should give the full clarity to the reading person. If I am reading your algorithm, it should give me the full clarity. Okay, then well defined. Each and every instruction, each and every step inside your algorithm, it must be well defined. Well defined in the sense it has to do something inside your algorithm. It has to do something inside your algorithm. That means it should have some proper meaning when you are writing inside your algorithm. Without meaning, and if it is not doing anything inside your algorithm, keeping that instruction inside your algorithm is meaningless. Isn't it? Keeping that step or keeping that instruction inside your algorithm is meaningless. Hope you understood. And it should halt after a finite time. So whatever step or whatever instruction you have taken inside your algorithm, it should halt after some finite amount of time. We can have that estimation after how much time that particular instruction will end. If you have started one particular instruction, or if you have started one particular step and it is keep on taking time, it is not at all halting, not at all terminating. Is it a valid statement? Is it a valid instruction? No. Nobody will select such an instruction into your algorithm. Isn't it? It is a waste of time. If it is taking more time, it is waste of time. So it should halt or it should terminate. Every step should terminate in a finite amount of time. In a finite amount of time. So again, once again, we read this complete statement after this understanding. Yeah. An algorithm is an ordered sequence of unambiguous and well-defined instructions that performs some task and halts in a finite time. And one of the important statement, the third statement when you read, the algorithm is language independent. Language independent means, in order to write the algorithm, there should not be any specific language and there should not be any specific programming language. Language, programming language, natural language, whatever we are talking about, they are simply languages only. Okay, a medium to express our feelings. And there should not be any specific language. When we are talking about algorithm and when we are writing the algorithm, there should not be any specific language. Yes, you know the Hindi language, you can write your algorithm in Hindi. You know the English, you can write in English. You know Telugu, you can write in Telugu. So likewise, there should not be any specific thing when we are writing the algorithm. Okay? Algorithm is language independent. That is, the plain instruction in an algorithm can be written in any language to get the expected output. Okay? So this thing also you have to remember. Algorithm is not language specific. See, whatever wordings we have inside this definition, that I have elaborated over here. Already I have given the clarity. But anyhow, see, the first word is ordered sequence. So why we are saying ordered sequence? Then unambiguous and well-defined. What do you mean by unambiguous and well-defined? The second thing. And after that we have, performs some task. It should perform some task. Okay, this is your third one. And finally, the halts in finite time. Halts in finite time. So this is your fourth one. So the clarity I have given over here. Ordered sequence in the sense you should number all the steps. Okay, you should number all the steps in your algorithm so that they represent the order of those steps. If you're giving a particular instruction with number 1, that means you have to perform that instruction at first place. Okay, likewise, all the instructions should come in orderly sequence. Okay, then they should be unambiguous and well defined. Each instruction should be clear and understandable without any difficulty. No one should feel difficulty in your understanding, in the algorithm understanding. Okay, then performs a task. Every instruction must perform a task. Without a proper role, you can't put an instruction into your algorithm. Then halts in finite time. Algorithm must terminate at some point. If it is keep on taking time, it is waste of use. Okay, so these 4 things I have explained here. Yeah, then we have the characteristics or specifications, or we also call them as properties of an algorithm. So what are these? Characteristics of an algorithm, specifications of an algorithm, or properties of an algorithm. They are just the synonyms. They are just the synonyms and meaning is same. For all these, meaning is same. You can say, I mean, they can ask questions in your exam. It is one of the important question for SAQ, short answer question. So generally they will ask this question for 2 marks. Okay, short answer question in the sense 2 marks question. So they will ask the question like this: define the term algorithm and what are the specifications of an algorithm. Likewise, they can ask or define the term algorithm and what are the properties of an algorithm. Or they can also use a word characteristics. To represent this one, they also use a word characteristics. Define the term algorithm and write the characteristics of an algorithm. So what is the importance of these characteristics, or what is the importance of these specifications or properties in the sense? See, we can have anything written in natural language, isn't it? We can have a normal notes also written in natural language. Can we call that notes as an algorithm? No, we can't call the notes whatever you are writing. Currently, maybe when you are watching this video, you may be noting down some points. Can we call those points as an algorithm? No, isn't it? So in order to call a description as an algorithm, it has to have it needs to have these properties. Okay, when can we call a description as an algorithm means it needs to have this following properties. If your description is having these following properties, then we call that description as an algorithm. So that is what I have written over here. Not all written instructions can be considered as an algorithm. In order to consider the written statements as an algorithm, it must have the following properties. Okay, what are those? Input. Every algorithm must have 0 or more inputs. Okay, 0 or more inputs. Every algorithm, it should take either 0 or more inputs. It depends on the type of algorithm, or it depends on the type of problem, how many inputs you are giving or how many outputs you are taking from the algorithm. So when we are talking about the input, your algorithm may or may not have any input. So if it is having, it should be 1 or more than 1, and if it is not having, it will be 0 inputs. So here you can read an algorithm has 0 or more inputs taken from a specified set of objects. So who will provide that object? It will differ from problem to problem. Who will give that input to the algorithm? It will differ from problem to problem. Okay. So next, output. So every algorithm, so we said 0 inputs, but every algorithm must give at least 1 output, 1 or more than 1. So an algorithm has 1 or more outputs. See, when we are talking about inputs, we are saying 0 or more. But when we are talking about output, we are saying one or more. That means there should not be any zero outputs. There should not be any zero outputs. That means your algorithm must generate output. If your algorithm is not generating any output, means it is a useless algorithm. If it is not giving any result, if it is not giving any output, then it is a meaningless algorithm, isn't it? So every algorithm must generate one or more outputs. Okay, then definiteness. Each step must be precisely defined. Precisely in the sense it should have a proper meaning in your algorithm. Each instruction is clear and unambiguous. Definiteness means already we discussed what is clear and what is unambiguous meaning. Okay, so each step must be clear and unambiguous, and it should be precisely defined. So this is the definiteness property. Then finiteness, already we know your algorithm must end, must terminate, must halt itself in a finite amount of time, after a finite amount of time. Okay, so the algorithm must always terminate after a finite number of steps or after a finite amount of time. Then effectiveness. Each algorithm must be basic and simple. Okay, and it has to give the expected solution to the problem in a finite number of steps. Effectiveness means it has to give the algorithm must be basic and simple. It should be understandable by each and every one in that domain. Okay, so these are 5 of the properties, 5 of the characteristics, or 5 of the specifications to your algorithm. So the next thing, now here at this point we will discuss a simple example for an algorithm. Okay, so any real-time problem or any computational problem can be taken into our consideration as an algorithm example. So I will take a very simple real-time problem, no computational problem. We'll go slowly towards the computational problem, but at the at the first level, it is better to have a real-time problem which we all will understand very easily, isn't it? So that is the reason why what I have done means I have taken a very simple example for your understanding. Okay, so let us quickly go and do that for our sake. So the algorithm here which I am taking is okay, maybe it is visible to you. Hope it is visible to you. Okay, so here see, first we'll write an algorithm. Okay, algorithm for making a cup of tea. Okay, it may look ridiculous to you, but believe me, in many books they have taken this example only in order to give the understanding on algorithms. So we'll follow the same thing and we'll do it. So our job, our problem here is, we do, most of us we do in the morning as a first step, isn't it? After waking up in the morning, we need a cup of tea. So algorithm for making a cup of tea. So what steps we follow in order to prepare a cup of tea? Okay, so in every algorithm, you remember, whenever we are going to write the algorithm, in every algorithm the first step will be, we have to number all the steps. Whatever steps we are writing inside our algorithm, we have to number them so that one will know the order of sequence, isn't it? How they will come in your algorithm. What step you have to perform first and what step you have to perform next. Likewise, in order to give the sequencing, in order to give the order of all those instructions, we have to number them. So the first step will be start. We have to start, isn't it? We have to start our job. We have to start doing the job. So the first step will be start. Okay. Now, the second step, okay, generally the input. So for almost all, whether it is a real time, whether it is a computational problem, whatever it is going to be, the second step will always be the input. So what input we have to this algorithm. So in order to make the tea, what we need, what input we need, isn't it? We need the ingredients, all the ingredients we need. So all the ingredients or tools, all those things will come under the um, input only. So that thing, collect the required ingredients, or we can also call them as tools. So the second step, what we are doing here in the process of making tea, the second step, what we are doing, we are collecting the required ingredients or the required tools, whatever we need. So what are my tools or what are my ingredients here? Okay, so they can be, yeah, all those things I'm writing over here. Okay, all those things I'm writing. So the first thing, we need a stove. Basically, yeah, for flames we need a stove. Then we need a bowl to prepare the tea. Then we need, yes, very important ingredient, that is powder, tea powder, and we need sugar. We also need some water. Yes, thing may look ridiculous to you. Why we are discussing all these unnecessary things over here? It may look like that, but for your understanding, this is very important. Very soon we are going to do many computational stuff in this manner only. So that is the reason why I have taken a very simple example of algorithm, that is making tea. So this we all know how to do. So that is the reason I have taken this example. And if you refer the books, they have also taken this type of similar examples, real-time examples, so that to give the clarity on algorithms. Okay, so next thing, yeah, not only this, we also need the filter. So after preparation of the tea, we need to filter it, isn't it? So we need a filter, then we need a cup. So all these are my input to the algorithm. All these are my ingredients in order to prepare the tea. Ingredients are tools in order to prepare the tea. Then the third one will be, yes, after collecting the ingredients, we can start the process, isn't it? So under that, what we have to do, lit the stove. We have to put the stove on, or we have to make the flame on the stove. Then and put the bowl on it. Yes, put the bowl on it and add some water. We have to add the water and wait till it boil, isn't it? After adding the water, what we are doing? We are waiting till it gets boiled. So yes, this is my third step. Okay, then step 4 will be add the tea powder. When it is boiling, we have to add the tea powder, then add the sugar and let it boil for some more time. To get the flavor, what we do? We'll let it boil for some more time. So how much time? If you want specific over here, that you can mention 2 to 3 minutes, like this, isn't it? So it is something like a recipe, we can say, to make the tea. So next is the fifth step. So when it is boiling, when tea powder, everything you have added, and again it is boiling, then what we do? Add the milk, isn't it? Add the milk and let it boil for some more time. Let it boil for some more time. So again 2 to 3 minutes. Okay. Yes, after this, your tea is ready. Filter it into a cup. We have already collected the cup. That cup we are using over here to filter we are using filter and cup to filter the tea. Okay, then enjoy the tea. The last step, I mean seventh step, enjoy the tea. And finally, the last step will be stop. So likewise, this is the algorithm, the complete procedure to prepare the tea in my consideration. So as I have explained this entire thing over here, maybe you will get some idea. Okay. Yeah, the same without explanation. I have let us assume that I have not explained what I have written over here. I have simply given the idea that you have to write an algorithm for making tea, and I told you how to write. Told you in the sense I have given only the instructions how to write the algorithm, that every step must you have to number, and the first step will be start and the last step should be stop. Likewise, these type of ideas, the way how you write the algorithm, that I have explained. The way how you write the algorithm, that I have explained. But what you have to write inside the algorithm, let us assume I have not explained. So I have given this problem to you. Okay, write an algorithm for making tea, making a cup of tea. So what step you will put inside it? Of course, the first step and this last step, as I said, it should be start and stop. They will be common in all you 60 people. So let us assume I have given this task to a class of 60 students. So all will put the first step as start and the last step as stop, because this I have given as a standard procedure. The rest of the steps what you are going to write. Okay. The first step, collection of ingredients. Maybe your ingredients will differ from my ingredients or my tools. Okay. Maybe some people will add more, like they also need to stir the tea. They also need a teaspoon. That also they will add. Okay. So maybe they need some flavor inside their tea. If they need some flavor like ginger and elaichi, that also they will add. Isn't it? That also they will add. Flavor to the tea. That also they will add. So likewise, the steps what I have, the procedure, the process what I have followed. The first I said lit the stove, then put the bowl, let it boil, add the water, let it boil. Like that I said. So maybe they prepared the tea in a different way. So what they will do, they will directly put the milk on the stove and they will let the milk boil, and once it is boiling, they will add the tea powder and other flavors. So likewise, so when I'm giving a problem to a group of people, when I'm giving a problem to a group of people and I'm asking them the procedure, okay, there is no guarantee that all will give the same procedure or all will give the same solution. So what I mean to say over here is, my point over here is, no two algorithms are going to coincide. Everybody will have their own idea of doing the things, their own idea of doing the stuff. So definitely algorithms will differ from person to person. So whatever I have written, the algorithm I have written over here, it's my idea of doing the thing. It's my way of doing the thing. It's my way of solving that problem. Maybe you people are going to have your own way. Maybe you people are going to have your own thoughts of solving this problem. Isn't it? So always we have to look for the best solution. Always we have to look for the best appropriate solution, best appropriate algorithm for solving any given problem. Okay, it is the study of data structures where we do the analysis of algorithms that we are going to study in your third semester. Okay, algorithm analysis where we do in your third semester. Hopefully you got some clear understanding of how we are writing these algorithms, and we'll discuss some more examples under these algorithms, and again we'll see the pseudo code, we'll see how we start writing the program. All those things we'll see in our upcoming classes. Okay, till that point, whatever we discussed in today's class, you better make a notes. You better make a notes and have the clarity, because these things are very much going to help us in the practical stuff as well. When we start doing the things practically, these type of things will help us a lot. So simply we have discussed a simple algorithm example, making tea, in today's class, and try to write the same algorithm in your own way. Okay, in your running notes, what you have to do, you need to write, or else you take any other problem. You take any other problem and try to write the algorithm for that problem. Okay, hopefully you do it. Okay, so yeah, till your next class. Thank you very much. Okay, see you in your next class.